In the beginning, there was cloud. Then we had public and private cloud. Then we had hybrid cloud and multiple clouds. And now we have multi-cloud. So, multi-cloud. Just another trendy tech dalliance for the network fashionista to fuss over? Or is this a real move and evolution of cloud services? Here with me to discuss this are Elliot Townsend. Not sure I need to say any more, Elliot. So, Senior Systems Engineer, serial dandy, and all-round multi-cloud guru at Juniper Networks. Welcome, Elliot.
Thank you.
And Chris Gilmore, Axians CTO, my co-host on our live
and
shows.
Devout non-dandy.
Devout non-dandy, and all-round font of network knowledge. So, welcome to you both.
Thanks.
So, opening question then, multi-cloud, just another cloud trend, or are we seeing a real shift in evolution?
I think we're seeing a real shift now. So if we think about a few years ago, we saw everyone moving up into the public cloud to try and save money. We're now starting to see a shift backwards because that's not actually the case. There's different clouds aspire to be different things now, and each have their own different benefits. So now it's all about people trying to kind of utilise those clouds for the right workloads.
Yeah, it was very much people ploughed in. You know, if you were told by your kind of CIO, we're cloud first, there was literally a wholesale move of as much into a particular cloud of choice at that time. So it was everything into AWS, everything into Azure. Now, whether that actually makes sense in terms of where their strengths and weaknesses are, I mean, that's half the problem we're seeing now, is that they're sort of evolving into their own specialist kind of areas, and one size does not fit all.
It might seem a bit daft, but there's also a confusion sometimes between multiple clouds and multi-cloud. So, Chris, definition of both? Must be quite simple.
I think multiple clouds is where you have a distributed workload across a number of cloud vendors, and you might have SaaS services from Azure or AWS. You might have Office 365 that you're taking as a service from those sort of platforms. You might have some workload in AWS, something in Oracle Cloud, and maybe a bit of Google as well for good measure. But it's very much a sort of distributed architecture. Multi-cloud, as far as I can see, is trying to bring consistency to that and allow a kind of more controlled exploration of cloud from an enterprise perspective.
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's using the abilities of all these different clouds, whether they be public or private, and seeing them as one, and having all the benefits that come with that.
Because there's been a sustained growth in cloud adoption over the past year or so, but that's not always been for the right reason, has it? And I'm thinking there's an example here as being cloud sprawl.
Yeah. So I think if you look at it, it's very easy to go off and go and create your own cloud. We're seeing a lot of developers going off and starting up their own clouds. With that, you kind of lose a lot of control. So you're seeing this kind of organic sprawl across the public cloud, and with that comes lack of control. And with that lack of control, you lose compliance, so you lose security. So whereas you get this great agility for your business because you can spin up workloads fast, what you're missing out on is that real security feature, which could be a big risk to the business.
Yeah, it's driving DevOps through compliance is never an exciting or fun thing to try and mandate in a business. But I think, we had server sprawl, then we went to a virtualized environment in a data center, and we had virtualized server sprawl. And all that's happened now is we've moved into the cloud, and in effect the same model is happening again. The VM-based version where you could spin up your own ESXi and spin up your own VM, and then go, brilliant, I've done that, and you'd walk away and not spin it down again, disable it or remove it. It's just sitting there, taking up resource. That's just been translated fully into the cloud, and we're seeing large enterprises who, if you were to ask them hand on heart what the extent of their estate would be in the cloud, I would find quite a lot of them have a real struggle to tell you exactly where their footprint is. And as you mentioned, from a compliance perspective, that's a nightmare.
And they're not following best practice or haven't done at all.
Well, it's very difficult because of this agility. If a developer can go off and go and do their own thing, then they're not going to follow the best practices that the security and the networks team will force them down. So, with this, you're kind of seeing a real cost added to it. So whereas before you had the virtual server sprawl, and the server sprawl, there was a cost, but it was kind of hidden. Now you're now you're seeing a real cost to that, and that's kind of spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
control is a word you hear a lot in multi-cloud conversations.
Yeah.
Is there a sort of context or to define the word control in multi-cloud?
Yeah, so I think for Juniper, our vision is around the control of harboring all of these different multiple different clouds all together. Yeah. So you're seeing a single policy set across workloads across any cloud. So if you have a workload on your within your public cloud, and in your private cloud, you can move those workloads around without any concerns about any policy rewrite, and you get the micro-segmentation piece as well, and that's massive.
So it's consistency, isn't it? I mean, it's being able to apply a consistent security policy irrespective of where the workload's located. So rather than having to build bespoke environments in AWS and Azure and Google or whatever, and then try and work out how to apply policy, you can apply a consistent security policy irrespective of whether the workload sits. So
yeah. So in if you look at the public cloud context, you're seeing that as currently that's kind of like a real open field, and that field goes on way into the distance. And what we're trying to do is kind of build a walled garden, so there is an element of control and consistency. So with that, all of the disadvantages that we were talking around earlier around organic growth and organic sprawl is kind of bring that all back in under one umbrella.
So if we, sorry, Chris.
I was going to say, and it also it then allows you to have one of the main reasons you go to the cloud is cost control.
Yeah. Yes.
If you have a walled garden environment, you still have the ability for the DevOps guys to spin up their own workloads, but it's under a certain set of processes and controls. Yeah. It means that from a business perspective, you can manage that cost a lot better because you have ultimate control over how many
control.
You're also making sure that the developers behave properly. So, I mean that in the nicest sense. So, before...
Do you want them to do that?
Well,
I don't think they want to be doing that.
It's very easy for them to kind of architect an application.
That stifles creativity, surely.
Maybe, but, what you're seeing is kind of the ability for these app guys to go off and go and spin up their own services and go and develop their application quickly for the cloud. That's not always the right thing to do. So doing it this way means they have to architect the application that's suitable for either the public or the private cloud, meaning that a business has the ability to move that workload wherever they see fit.
So shadow IT is also a problem then under the compliance and cloud sprawl.
Most certainly. Yeah.
So if we roll it back a few years is fairly new. Cloud was intended originally to be for large enterprise organisations to replicate data all over the place, so that they didn't have to hold it in one. So what has either changed, or what has multi-cloud changed, or what is the reality that it's delivered? If that's a fair question.
I think the use case for cloud has evolved quite considerably. I think initially it was, I want to get rid of my data center. All the things that are there, I'll push up into the cloud, but they're still in effect run by that business. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just you're moving the resource to a different location. So you've in effect outsourced the box it sits on. I think there's now a much more wide-ranging approach by many enterprises, and they'll take a combination of SaaS services where someone else will host an application and they literally consume it, and that consumption model is very attractive for enterprises because it means that they can pay for what they're using and not anymore. So I think that there's a definite change in how the cloud is being consumed. A lot of third-party vendors are hosting their own platforms as a SaaS service, whereas in the networking space there's a lot of tools and analytics platforms and third-party products that you would ordinarily buy and you'd implement into your network, and now even those are starting to be delivered as software only, and it's the whole model is being moved to that sort of subscription piece. But it's very much a best in practice and moving to the model you need to work to for your business. So
if you look at it, so you have at the moment you have your public cloud and your private cloud, and you have this kind of deep complexity around how applications are architected and how the operations team actually manage that. With the Juniper solution, you're essentially abstracting away that complexity and making it easier for your operations team to manage all these different clouds as one, but also not kind of taking away that agility that businesses are looking for when they look to the public cloud. So that's where I see it playing a part.
So you've sat in front of many customers, I'm sure, Elliot, talking to the nth degree about multi-cloud. What are the most common requirements then that customers bring up and say that, that leads to a multi-cloud conversation?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones are typically around micro-segmentation, the ability to work on essentially any modern networking equipment, so it doesn't have to be Juniper. Those are kind of quite key pieces, as well as the walled garden effect that I spoke about earlier. That definitely rings true to a lot of people because they're losing that control. You know, I've had a lot of businesses that have run reports across their public clouds, and they thought it was X%, and actually it was a lot greater that they were using. And with that, you have that non-compliance issue and the lack of security, which essentially could affect their brand. So
is security you'd say is
I'd say that's one of the biggest areas, definitely.
Consistency, consistency of approach and applying a policy irrespective of where that data is going to sit. If it's on your private cloud or in one of the hyperscalers, it's applying a set of criteria that are then consistently applied. Yeah,
and it's, you know, the model that we've taken is more of an implicit allow rather than an implicit deny, which changes the whole security model on its head essentially. So we kind of adapted a zero trust model, and that means that security that Chris just mentioned is suddenly completely turned over. They have to really think about security, and then that consistency then breeds that security.
It's a total re-architecture. I mean, it's not, you can't just translate your business into the cloud, and equally you can't just translate your business into multi-cloud. It's a stepped approach, and you have to look at how your applications work and the kind of resource requirements, but also, as you mentioned, the security is a complete 180. You have to look at it from a completely different viewpoint to be able to bring in. So it's not a case of a simple, easy task to do, and it's not insignificant, but it is something that will bring a lot of sort of benefits to businesses once you get there.
So, management, orchestration, multi-cloud in a Juniper world.
What does it consist of? So it consists of our Contrail product range, as well as using our AppFormix for the analytics side of things. So that's a really key piece, because looking at these different clouds.
And AppFormix was an acquisition last year.
2 years ago.
2 years
2 years ago now.
So
it's really important because you can use AppFormix to actually analyse to see where workloads are actually placed at any one particular time, and then drill right down to the underlay to actually see where your pain points actually are. And at the moment, that's a very difficult thing to do. So for us, it's Contrail, the Contrail product suite, as well as AppFormix as the monitoring section.
I think one of the important things, and one of the things that I quite like about the solution, is the fact that it's not an end-to-end lock-in. So Juniper have always been quite open about working with others. They realise they're never going to be, the amount of greenfield sites out there is shrinking on a day-by-day basis, so they've had to play nicely with others from day one. So they've always adopted an open standards model from their networking background. But I mean, in terms of the multi-cloud, there's certain key pieces of software that make up the multi-cloud solution. But in terms of the hardware in your private cloud, that's not a mandate. You must use Juniper. It's a case of, as long as there's certain capabilities that I think are pretty much available in most modern switches, it can be harnessed to kind of to build the bigger picture. And I think that approach gives them a much more relevant footplace in enterprise, because Cisco is everywhere, but not everywhere. And it's one of these things where irrespective of what is there, there's an argument for working with them.
So that tees up the next question nicely then. So if I can put it to you, what is the differentiation then for Juniper in terms of your approach to multi-cloud as opposed to the others?
I think it's essentially any workload, any cloud, we can control. I think touching on
any workload, any cloud, you can control it.
We can control. So essentially what we're saying is that we know we don't have certain product features or product sets, and there are others in the market that are better at doing certain things. No names mentioned, of course, but what we realise in this SDN environment is that we need to be able to pull on those and actually utilise those in a multi-cloud environment to benefit the customer. So we don't want vendor lock-in as such, like some other competitors, because we don't feel that's the best method for the customer.
I mean, the platform also has the ability to extend into the branch, extend into the campus, but it doesn't necessitate that, and I think that's the difference. So you can go as much or as little as you almost want to,
The power of contrail is ginormous. The amount it can do is incredible. I could probably sit here talking to you guys for 2 days, talking about what contrail can actually do. But I think, as Chris touched on, you can just use just certain elements until you feel comfortable, and then build yourself up, or you can go full hog.
So it's sort of pay as you grow.
Yeah, so essentially.
Yeah. It means it's not a rip and replace for a lot of things, and that's a very key message for a lot of enterprises.
So because like typically a migration plan, if it's not a greenfield, is typically we build it in a certain segment within their data center until they get more confident of it. They start looking at their business processes, because they need to amend their business processes for this. And essentially what we do is it then starts to build out and grow.
Actually, that's a good point. In terms of migration plan, when you turn up, customers typically, are they already on that sort of pathway? Or where do you find they are? Is it sort of you've come in because actually they've come to a point of thinking, where do we go now? Or are you being sort of invited in very early doors to do that planning, that process planning management piece, or engineering piece? Yeah,
so we as Juniper see like a 5-step. So there's 5 different steps in terms of where we categorise customers on that journey. But we have seen people jump from step 1 to step 5. Step 5 being the all-encompassing panacea of multi-cloud, or they just jump to stage 3, which is essentially just the micro-segmentation piece within their own private data center. So it's a real mixed bag, so to speak. And I think what's great is we're not constricted in terms of what the requirements are from the customer. We look at that and we can use the power of contrail to fit the use case that's relevant for the customer at any one time. It's not like it has to fit our exact use case. We're seeing lots of different use cases coming out all over the place.
And the other interesting thing there is also that it's, when you look at the kind of 5-step plan, it really reinforces the fact that a systems integrator is an important piece of the pie. Having someone who can work with the customer from the beginning to the end through the different steps and the different phases, and however small or large those chunks are, it is a very, very important part to this. It's not a case of, it's very rarely a case of, here's X million pounds, give me multi-cloud. It's a stepped process of changing processes internally and how their users use and consume their resources.
That's why a company like Axians is an important, very important channel partner to Juniper. In fact, I don't know whether we're talking out of turn here, but we've just completed a lab.
We're building a multi-cloud lab in our data center currently, yes. So we're going to be able to do the same levels of demonstrations that Juniper can, and then we're hoping to plumb a number of back-end resources into that to kind of enhance that lab over a period of time.
The ability to fully demonstrate to customers, to back Juniper and what you're doing. So
it gives us the ability to show the steps and show how we can actually bring them from where they are today to wherever they are in that kind of process, where the next sort of steps are, and then how to actually model that out.
Yeah, so we're aware that as Juniper, we are a piece of the puzzle. We are not the puzzle. So we're looking to the likes of
Which
Axians.
is quite an enlightened view for a vendor. in my time in this industry, that's quite an enlightened view of a vendor, yes.
So we're very aware of that, and it would pull on the likes of Axians to be actually build this puzzle together, because we're not just looking at the networking element, we're also looking at the application side as well as the compute and the storage, as well as the business processes. So it's not just us, so we all need to work together.
No,
it's not a single technology fix, it's a whole breadth of things.
You mentioned use cases earlier on. If you think of just a typical use case, one each of multi-cloud.
My biggest use
case... It was that
case,
question, or I was going to ask you, what are the 5 steps? Can you name them?
So I'll answer very quickly. For me, the conversations I've had with customers, one of the biggest use cases for multi-cloud, and this is a sort of a more immediate thing than a lot of things, is that compliance piece to stop shadow IT and sprawl. I mean, I have known customers who have inadvertently got into Amazon's top 10 customers in Europe through shadow IT. Now, there's a lot of zeros being used there.
So they had no idea.
They had no idea until they literally get the bill through. And then if you've got things like GDPR where there's fines of a significant amount of money, if you are the compliance officer for that business, that is a living hell. So if you look at short, medium and long-term benefits, I think one of the immediate things that would give value is being able to control that.
So it might be a given, but so has GDPR put more focus on this? Or not really?
I would say, well, for me, going back to the use case, but it's around the controlled agility. So, you know, cloud first gives you the agility, cost savings in inverted brackets. That's not always the case.
Cost effectiveness.
Cost effectiveness, yes.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now is the customer wants the ability to essentially have a self-service portal for the application dev guys to be able to click on it and say, I need X, Y, and Z. They click on it and it goes off and it goes and delivers that, set on the rules that networking and the kind of the server team have built together. So, you know, if they say, I want a web front end, it essentially drives into Contrail. Contrail will then push that networking out into the public cloud because that's where the company has deemed that the best place to actually place that workload. And essentially, you know, the database, they feel it's cheaper to have that on the private cloud. So essentially spin that up and tie that networking together. So they still have that agility, and essentially it's all controlled. So it's that controlled agility is definitely one of the biggest, followed by the micro-segmentation and compliance piece.
I think the other nice thing is that, I mean, a consistent bugbear of many businesses is inconsistency in design and lack of security built into the design for applications from the application developers. And this gives you a way of building a set of criteria that DevOps and application developers need to work to, which means that the end product that comes out is going to be more consistently securable. It's going to be more consistent in how it can be handled by the estate, and that as a sort of byproduct has a lot of value in itself. Having worked on a lot of estates and a lot of networks where there is almost no control over how the applications are built, and then having to have the network handle applications that have been built in isolation is a hiding to hell. And being able to have a level of control over criteria they have to work to before they can release the application has immense value in itself.
As well as the hidden decommissioning process. You know, I've worked for many companies, and decommissioning was just a term that was on a whiteboard and never actually practiced. But this gives you the ability to actually make sure that you can fail fast, if you will, or rip down if you need to, without having to worry about it sitting there and costing you money.
We're almost out of time.
Okay.
So I feel like we've summarised already, but if we're going to summarise, then we're talking about security, control. Jump in. How else would you summarise? So if you were summarising MultiCloud's to the elevator pitch, Elliot, for you it's
controlled agility with security.
I'd say
consistency.
And consistency. You've done his work.
I'd say it's a consistent approach to utilising clouds to the best of
their ability. Yeah, right cloud for the right workload.
Yeah.
That's almost a strapline.
That is the strapline. I think I might trademark that one.
Trademarked Townsend.
Well, there you go. That's been very, very informative. Elliot, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you
More
much.
can be found out about MultiCloud on Axians.co.uk or Juniper.net. I've been David 18. This has been an Axians Network production on Disruptive. Thank you for watching.
Hi, okay then we've sat down and had a fairly good discussion around this. Let's have a little look about what that actually means in more practice. So Elliot, if we look at multi-cloud, if the clouds parted, that single beam of light was to hit the ocean at that right moment, and the ultimate embodiment of multi-cloud was available, what would it look like?
Okay, well, that's quite an interesting discussion. So let's start off then with our app developer here. So our lonely little app developer wants to make their life...
The source of all evil.
wants to make their life nice and easy. And they want to essentially... What we're going to do is they're essentially going to interact with their OSS or their BSS front-end system. And essentially that's going to be their portal to make all of the changes that are necessary for this. So essentially they're going to log on to this tool and they're going to essentially say, this is what I want. Okay. So in the background, what does that actually look like? So the OSS or BSS front-end system will talk to Ansible. Now,
is that playbooks or Tower or both?
That is playbook. So if we say here we have a service template repository.
Yeah.
So that's essentially where all of our playbooks are actually stored. So all of the kind of multiple different types of scenarios are actually stored here.
Okay.
Now, from whenever one of those is invoked, that will then talk to our IDAM, so our identity management solution.
So that's who's doing what and where?
Who's doing what where, so role-based access, you could say. Our directory services, so who is that person?
Yeah.
Then from here, we're going to talk to like our project tracking tool. So for example, let's say Jira, so that's logging all of the projects, all of the issues that is encountering.
That means that multiple developers could book stuff to the same project and
Correct.
it kind of maps through the costings.
So it's all mapped and logged somewhere. Then we also have our collaboration tool, so let's use, let's say Confluence as an example. My great spelling here. Now from here also we have our source control, so let's say GitHub. And also our binary repository, so let's say Artifact. So that's all of the application side of the story.
Yeah.
So kind of what they're used to dealing with. But obviously what normally happens is that then goes off to the networking team to actually go and provision all of the networking elements and all the security elements, and et cetera, et cetera.
6 months to then develop from that point.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what we're talking about now is actually from here, it's also going to talk to Contrail networking.
Okay.
Oh. And also Contrail security. Now from here, Contrail networking is going to talk to the likes of, you know, OCP. It's going to talk to ESXi. It's going to talk to our, it's going to create a bare metal as a service.
This is where things like Hyper-V and KVM and those other types of hypervisors.
So, you know, we just do ... So that goes on and on. So essentially what happens is, as I said before, so project dev or application developer logs onto the OSS or BSS front-end system, says, I want this sort of application. Ansible drives it all, but essentially talks to all of these different pieces to actually bring that all together.
So Ansible's a really key part to all of it.
Ansible's a very key part of this.
And the thing that strikes me straight away is that it's not a waterfall Juniper solution.
No, definitely not.
You are a significant part of, but not all of.
Exactly, and I think what really plays into Juniper's hands here is that, you know, we can work with pretty much anyone because we follow that open source kind of following. It's ingrained within us.
That's quite a complicated overall kind of picture. I can't imagine you could jump straight to this. So is there some sort of phased approach that people could take to kind of get to this endpoint?
Most certainly. So, you know, we've devised a 5-step program as such. So the Juniper 5-step program that we can go into more detail around.
Okay, that'd be good if you could.
Yep.
So, Elliot, can you go into a bit more detail on the 5 steps?
Yeah, of course. So, let me get that lid off. So if we start here. Our 5 steps as such. So if we say, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, what we're seeing genuinely is kind of people around this mark. It's typically where we see most of our customers, 1.5 to 2. So 1 being kind of like everything's very manual. You know, your network technicians doing everything manually. You know, they're actually technicians. They're not being technologists. They're not doing anything fancy. That's kind of where a lot of people actually are, and they're trying to aspire to be here. So this is kind of where you start automating workflows.
Okay.
You know, you start to introduce that automation into every type of aspect that you can. Step 3 is where you start to look at, you know, the analytics and how they then kind of event-driven, you could say. So looking at the analytics.
So feedback loops and how you can get information from your network. Yeah.
Automating your testing as well, and automating your workflows. Step 4 is around the continuous automation process, kind of, you know, that full flow end-to-end requires very little manual intervention. Then step 5 is the secure and automated multi-cloud that we discussed just a minute ago. Okay,
so I mean, it seems to me that step 1 is almost sort of the data center of old.
Yes, the default.
The default data center of old. So you could really look at this in sort of 3 main chunks, couldn't you? You could say that sort of the first phase is taking your data center and turning that into a private cloud.
Most certainly.
And then all the benefits you get from that, the microsegmentation, the ability to access resources and consume them in a completely different fashion. And then the middle bit seems to me to be almost a kind of a taking that private cloud and then implementing a lot more automation and optimization.
Yep.
And analytics.
Correct.
And I think the key one here is also control. So then the third sort of chunk is almost taking that and extending that with the control into your hyperscalers.
Correct. So using the right cloud for the right workload
Okay.
is essentially what we're looking at.
So you can see how people can migrate and move through this process.
Most certainly. This is kind of, I hate to say it, I hate using this phrase, but it's essentially the journey that people can go on.
The journey's good because it's where people like Axians can help our customers.
Most certainly.
We help with the kind of the moving from one to another.
Yeah.
Okay, that explains it in a lot more detail. Thank you. Okay, so this gives you that kind of that process through from Luddite's data center to Nirvana moment. If I had a big enough bag of cash, could I come to you and say I would like a full multi-cloud with the hyperscale control? And by that now, is that achievable now, or is this something that's a kind of a roadmap or something that's futures?
That is achievable now. I think the most important thing to think of is that this isn't going to fix your business processes. You need to get those in order in order to be here.
Okay.
It is a transformation.
So technically and technologically, you can get to here.
We can get to there.
From a business process and business organisational perspective, there's probably a parallel set of steps to get to the end point.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an abstract sort of process view of how you'd achieve this multi-cloud deployment. How does it actually look technically?
Yeah, okay, so let's kind of draw this up in terms of a high-level technical diagram, shall we?
Okay, cool. Okay, so can you show us a kind of high-level view from the network perspective of what multi-cloud actually looks like?
Most certainly. Right, let me grab my colours. So we'll start off with our first data center, so DC1 for example, and we're going to have our gateway routers on the edge right there. Now from there, let's say that connects into our spines, and then from there that connects into our IP fabric, so our leaves.
So typically like an IP clos environment.
An IP clos, exactly. EVP and VXLAN. Whatever you see fit. So from here, obviously that scales for however large you need your data center to be.
Yeah.
And then from here is essentially where all of your applications and services all currently sit at the moment.
And that can be functional and service applications.
That could be functional. So, in there we could have, our IDAM solution that we spoke about earlier.
Okay.
That's where Contrail would sit, for example, the actual application itself, our storage, everything, our compute is all sat within here.
So this is your private cloud infrastructure in
Correct.
terms of the compute part of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Because Axians have got a private cloud reference model called VPAC, so that's where we can actually add to the overall picture. Would be
brilliant
to bring that kind of piece. And ironically, and quite helpfully, VPAC is actually controlled ultimately by an Ansible template set.
So you can tie it into what we
tie the
spoke
whole
about
thing
earlier.
into,
Excellent stuff. So, that's our initial data center, and then we have the same mirrored again. So again, our gateway routers. Again, that goes into our spines. That goes to our leaves.
It's a well-architected data center.
Well-architected data center, this one. And then that connects down into our application stack again.
Okay.
So again, fixing that all together. So I'm not going to copy over what we've written there, but it's again mirrored here.
Okay.
So that all looks well and good. That will connect to either a private WAN or a public WAN. Let's just call this public for now. Okay, so that's all connecting to each other.
Okay.
Now, obviously, if you're using private IP addresses down here, typically you have to NAT those so that they can then be accessed over here.
Yeah.
But what we could do is essentially we could create this. What colour should I do this in? Let's do this in a pink again. So let's call this our Ipsec Gateway. And again here as well. So what we're creating essentially is an Ipsec mesh between our two data centres, being able to transfer easily between the two. You're probably thinking, well, that's all well and good, but what is the point in that? And the reason for that is if we look at an application, it's a really bad application. But let's say this is app 2, and this is app 1. And obviously they need to talk to each other, and we provisioned it within Contrail. What Contrail would do is actually stitch these together by creating overlays over the top of this to make it nice and easy.
And apply the security policy required on access control using the IDAM and the various pieces.
Exactly. So that zero trust model that we talked about earlier with Contrail security, that all then ties into this as well.
Okay.
So that's all well and good from that point. And now we start to look at, the full secure automated multi-cloud.
This is our hyperscaler hook-in.
This is the hyperscaler hook-in. So from here, we're talking around, let's draw AWS as an example. Now to mirror what's down here, best practice, would essentially be 2 VPCs. And essentially we'd have, let's do it in the right colour, Ipsec Gateway again.
Yeah.
And again, this then gets added into our mesh.
Okay.
Typically that can be done all via Ansible as well. So as a new VPC comes online, that will get brought in. And again, we're bringing another public cloud. Other public clouds are available. But for this example, we use Azure. Again, same again. And tying that back in again.
So that then gives you physical private cloud resilience from an application level.
Yeah.
And also resilience in the hyperscalers themselves.
Correct.
And the ability to move your applications from one to two to another to the cloud and any cloud you want to.
Correct. So what you can do is from Ansible, you can either pull it in directly and talk to AWS directly, or you could, if you wanted to, you could install Contrail on EC2 instances, for example.
Okay.
And essentially you have all of the smarts that you would have in Contrail that you would have in your private cloud replicated in AWS as well. So, you kind of have that flexibility to kind of go where you see fit.
Sure. I mean, the thing that strikes me is that if you've got Ipsec concentrators here and here, then what you could use for your WAN connection is you could actually build an SD-WAN environment.
Most certainly.
Or in fact, leverage an existing SD-WAN environment, connect those data centers up to the cloud using virtual functions, and then what it would allow you to do is you would then have the ability to have your headquarters and a number of branch sites. Actually, not connecting directly to the data center, into the cloud.
Correct, and you could...
And in effect, bring that whole cloud environment on net to those sites.
Exactly, and you could also take it one step further and say, right, I'm a parent company, and I have different operating companies.
Yeah.
And essentially, I want my operating companies to be able to consume all of this data. And essentially, you can add that on board.
So you can have shared resources. So you can have shared environments down here that are controlled by the security policies.
Yeah.
So there's no leakage issues.
Yeah.
It might help towards your GDPR compliancy.
It might do. It might well do.
And allows you to in effect build the cost model into a kind of a larger picture.
Yeah.
So you're looking at it from a kind of a group perspective rather than individually.
Exactly. It's all about control. It's all about security. And it's all essentially about agility.
Brilliant.
There we go.
How can I buy one?
Come talk to Juniper.
All right, have a word.